this is Lulu from As You Wish Pottery, and in this video we're painting the hot cocoa mug with this darling little snowman or marshmallow snowman. So to begin, we're going to use a piece of tissue paper and a pencil to trace over the image on the lesson plan. So all I'm doing is just following the lines I see here. You could also change them up if you wanted to make your marshmallow snowman be wearing something different. You're more than welcome to do that. So I would suggest that you kind of sketch it out with the pencil first, so that way you can see it before we transfer it onto the mug. If you want to just continue tracing on, and if you want to make yours look just like mine, you just have to follow along the image and trace all the lines you see on the design itself. So now we're going to grab that piece of tissue paper, we're going to put it over our mug, wherever you want your snowman to be, and you're going to follow along all the lines using a Sharpie marker. Make sure that you use one hand to secure the piece or the piece of tissue paper over the piece of pottery, just to make sure that your lines don't move and that you don't accidentally sketch somewhere you're not supposed to be sketching or tracing. Apart from that, remember that the marker will disappear once the piece is fired. So right now all we're doing is just getting a general idea of where we want our snowman to be and how he's going to kind of look, but everything that is traced right now will disappear once it's fired. The only thing that will be left over is just what's actually painted. So if you make any mistakes, it's totally okay. Just remember to kind of ignore them when you're painting, and they won't be there when we fire the piece. So don't worry about mistakes at this point at all. Alright, so let's start painting. We're going to use our small brush to paint the background of the mug with 1 to 2 coats of blue ice. It's easier to start around the snowman and then paint the rest of the mug once you're done there. I would also suggest that you remember to rinse off your brush after each color used. That way you can make sure that your brush is always clean when you grab it to paint with another color. But for right now, we're just using that blue ice. We're doing about 1 to 2 coats. So as you see, my coats started kind of watery, and that's okay. I do want it to be a little lighter, so that way I can be a little bit more careful around my snowman. And then once I have a good outline of his background or the space around him, I can go in and add more coats after that. So just start off with a light coat and then keep adding more paint to make it a little darker. All right, so now we're going to use that same small round brush. We're going to make sure that we rinse it really, really well first, and then we're going to use it to paint the handle of the mug with 1 to 2 coats of red. Make sure that your brush is really rinsed before you start painting so your paint doesn't mix with the blue, and make sure that you go over your handle twice. Let it dry on the first coat and then go over it one more time to make sure that the red looks really bright and colorful. Next, we're going to use the detail or the small brush to paint the snowman using 1 to 2 coats of polar bear. Keep in mind that we want to make sure that only our snowman is painted, so I'm going to be using the detail brush just because I prefer it to help me paint smaller spaces. But you're more than welcome, if you feel more comfortable using the small round brush, you're more than welcome to use that instead. Here I started with his belly, and then once I'm done with his body, right, I'm going to move on to his head. And keep in mind, you want to kind of be careful around his nose, that way you can see that later. It's okay if you paint over it. It just makes it a little trickier to be able to see what we sketched when there's paint on top, right? So we want to kind of avoid it. So if you are working with that small brush, I would suggest that you change onto the detail brush for this part, so that way you can avoid his little triangular nose, which we'll paint with a different color later on. Next, I'm going to rinse off my detail brush, and I'm going to use that same brush to paint the cracker underneath the snowman with 1 to 2 coats of pumpkin pie. Next, I'm going to rinse off my detail brush again, and I'm going to use it to paint the chocolate above the cracker and underneath the snowman with 1 to 2 coats of chocolate mousse. And when I say 1 to 2 coats, that's just solely up to you. It's your preference. So 1 coat, you can still see brush strokes, right? You can kind of see the paint becomes kind of translucent, and then 2 coats just signifies that it's going to be a little bit more of a solid color, and I prefer there to be a little bit more of a solid tone to things. So I like to do 1 to 2 coats, but it's up to you. If you'd like the chocolate to be a little bit lighter, you just have to paint 1 coat instead. All right, so with that detail brush, again, remember to rinse it really, really well before you start using it. I'm going to paint the snowman's scarf and his little earmuffs on his head with 1 to 2 coats of the red color. Alright, so once I'm done with the red, I'm going to rinse off my brush again really, really well this time because I'm going to use it to paint polar bear stars or snowflakes all around the mug. And I want to make sure that my paint, my white paint doesn't turn pink, right? So what that means is I'm going to rinse my brush off really, really well before I get started on there. And then I'm just going to paint some little stars or snowflakes kind of in the shape of stars. It's really however you like to do them. I kind of like to do them as stars. So it's just a couple of lines that cross each other. I would say like 3 lines that cross each other or so. And then I'm going to add a couple little dots around to give it that little bit of a snowflake or snowing in look. Next, I'm going to paint the snowman's carrot nose, and I'm going to do that with 2 coats of orange crush. I'm going to start off by outlining the shape first and then filling it in. I think that this is just the easiest way to ensure that the shape stays the same. So I would suggest that you do the same. Just kind of create a triangle, follow the lines that you have traced, and then fill them in with the same paint. So now I'm going to paint the inside of my cup, and I'm going to use that 2 coats of red, and you can use the medium or the small brush, whichever brush you have. I would just not use the detail brush because that's too little, right? So I'm just going to start off from the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up. I'm going to be careful towards the rim just because I don't want to paint the rim red. I want to keep that blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very careful when I'm getting towards the top, but on the inside it's just going to be messy, messy painted. All right, so here I'm going to touch up my rim one more time. I just want to make sure that the rim is really blue and nice. So what that means is I'm going to use that small round brush, and I'm just going to carefully go over the rim right where it's white right now, or right where it's bisque, right, where it's unpainted. I'm just going to be careful around making sure that I stay within that space and making sure that I don't paint anything past that, so that way my snowman stays the color he is and I don't paint over any stars. Alright, so next I'm going to use the detail brush to paint the snowman's twig arms, and I'm just using the detail brush just because I want to get some really nice skinny lines to look like little twigs, and it's just pretty much the line that was traced there earlier. And if not, all you have to do is just kind of look at the image that we have on the lesson plan and just kind of follow along and create your own little twiggy arms. Alright, so next it's time for the outlining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my detail brush and I'm going to outline my snowman, and I'm going to start off from the inside and work my way out. Sometimes I start from the outside and work my way in. It's really up to you, however you feel the most comfortable. Just make sure that you're holding your piece with one hand and that you're kind of rotating it and moving it around, so that way you can make sure that you paint as comfortably as you'd like. Remember not to heavy load your brush whenever you're outlining. We want to keep the tip of the brush as lightly not with a lot of paint. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say don't put too much paint on the tip of your brush, so that way you can get some really nice small lines. And if you have any accidents, just let it dry. You can kind of scrape it off and retouch any spots that you have a little bit of an accident on. That's totally okay. I just always suggest to let things dry if you do have any accidents, but we want to kind of avoid as many accidents as possible. So just take your time, take it slow, don't rush whenever it comes to outlining. Have fun with it, and just kind of follow the lines you have already traced on there. That's all we're doing, is just following the lines we see already. Okay, so here I wanted to show you. So I'm using the back of my detail brush. I'm going to scrape off a little bit of a section here that I accidentally outlined a little too crazily. So what I'm doing is just kind of using my detail brush to scrape off some of that paint. Then I'm going to put some more paint back on and re-outline it. So that's the same process if you have any mistakes or any accidents. Let the paint dry so that way when you scrape it off, it's just whatever accident you had that you're scraping off, and you're not taking off wet paint, right? And then just retouch it back up, outline it, and you're good to go. Next, I'm going to paint the little dots for his eyes, mouth, and the little buttons on his body. So keep in mind, I'm just using the tip of a pencil, but you could also use the back of your small brush, or you could use the tip of a pencil yourself. Whatever's gonna give you some nice dots that you don't really have to do much on. I don't like using the actual detail brush for it because when your brush bends, it kind of makes those little dots bigger. So I just wanna kind of focus on the little dots. So I'm just using the smallest dotter I have, which is my pencil. After I'm done with all the outlining on my snowman, I'm going to turn my cup around and I'm going to write a name on the back of the cup. You could write your name, or if you want to give this to someone, you could write their name. And all I'm doing is just lightly sketching it out with the pencil, just really lightly. I do not want to scratch any paint off. All I'm doing is just setting my letters there so that way I can paint over them. Again, remember that you want to not load your brush with too much paint, and just because it's easier to add more paint to the line than it is to take it away, right? So just start off with a little amount of paint. Don't get too overzealous. Don't try to do it too fast. Take your time. Each letter should be painted on, which means that you're gonna work on each letter a little bit, and that's okay. It's just the same thing as when we were outlining our snowman. We want it to look good, so we're gonna take our time. We're gonna see what each letter needs on its own, and then once we're done, we can go back and add more paint if needed, make lines thicker if needed, that kind of thing. But just take your time with it, don't rush it, and have fun with it. Here I'm going to use my detail brush to paint a couple little dots on my snowman's face because I forgot to give him a smile. So as you see, you could use the tip of the brush, or you could use a pencil to paint your little dots. It's really up to you, whatever you find the easiest. And here's my finished cup and the back of it as well. Isn't it the cutest? All right. Thank you so much for painting with me. Have a great day, and bye-bye.